Oh, that's nice.
Greetings, everyone. It is February, and I hope it is sunny and pleasant everywhere else, like it is here. Pleasant but cold. Um,
Hmm.
and we don't have a specific presentation today, so we're just going to talk about what we got going on. Um, we don't always get Santiago, so let's see what Santiago's got going on this month.
So, yeah, I haven't been for the last few meetings mainly because I've been busy helping out my grandmother and other stuff. But you know, I what I wanted, what if I were to the meeting in November, what I was going to talk about there, which I'll bring up now because I'm finally here, is that I attended a conference, well, not a conference, like a convention of some sort in Raleigh, North Carolina. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but it's called All Things Open, and I attended that back in October, November, and from there I got to meet with several Linux and like people who are into Linux and open source, everything open source basically. And it was a pretty good experience. It was like 4 days, and I got to meet with several people who were into Linux. I got to have dinner with somebody who was into Linux, so we talked for like a few hours, and it was a really good event, and I got to learn more about Linux and open source from that. So it was a really, yeah, I mean, other than from that particular event, I haven't really been doing much with Linux. I mean, I'm still taking my classes and stuff. I'm on Udemy and stuff like that, learning about Linux because I want to learn more about it. And actually, I'm going to start working on a resume later on. I think this week to apply for to hopefully get a job one day in the future in the Linux system administration field because I really feel like I can, if I study more, I'll be able to get into that. But yeah, if I were really to say what I've been doing, I mean, I've been working on my Linux course. I've been attending. I've attended an event in November where I got to learn more about Linux and open source. So that was a good experience for me. And I've also and I mean, I haven't really been working much other than from those two big projects. I mean, I'm starting to get back into Linux now. I'm going to start working on Linux from scratch, and again, because that was a project that me and Dan, I'll say Dan's name because Dan took a part in Linux from scratch, and that was and I want to start getting back into that again since he completed that, and I want to be able to figure that out more from that end. But yeah, I mean, if you guys were wondering what I've been doing with Linux and all that stuff, and even outside of what I've been doing, I'm doing a job right now in what's it again? I'm digitizing people's videos and stuff. So I'm working with technology even when I'm not working with Linux. But yeah, I mean, if I really had any more to say, I guess those would be the main things that I've been working on. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much I guess what I have to say for what I've been up to. I guess.
Santiago,
Yeah.
what kind of software do you use to digitize the photos and all that?
I use like a USB type of connector like that connects to AV, and I connect that to my computer, and I connect it through a software called OBS. And I use that and I basically set the file for the picture format to its right to how it would look into a VCR look, and basically record it from there. Once I pop in the tape, make sure that the audio and video visuals look all right. I also clean out my VCR every once in a while to make sure that it runs the tapes properly because VCRs get kind of dusty. So yeah, I guess, but yeah, if you're wondering what softwares I use OBS and a AV to USB type of adapter to connect to my computer.
Is OBS a Linux program or?
It's an open source, I think, or it's a free. I think it's free. I don't know if it's open source, but it is free and it can be run on Linux. Because I have used it on Linux before, but it's both for Windows, Mac, and Linux. So I mean, I really don't know too much about that, but yeah, I do know that it will work on Linux, and that's what I use originally for my recordings on both operating systems, whether it be Windows, Mac, or Linux.
Yeah, Jane OBS is Open Broadcaster Studio.
Yes,
It's-
Open
yeah.
Broadcaster
It
Studio.
is,
That is called.
it is open source.
Okay. Yeah, I did believe that it was open source, but I just didn't know exactly.
My understanding is that's an extremely popular application, not just for us open source aficionados, but you know, in other on various platforms.
Yeah, it is. I used it for live streaming before, so I can use it for other than just recording for my end.
Yeah, I've done as much as install it for my wife and help her get started with it, but I have no particular desire to create content, so I've not really fooled around with it myself.
Yeah,
One of
I
the,
only.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I just use it for. I know how to use somewhat of it because I do content on other platforms like YouTube. So I use OBS to stream and record stuff, and I know somewhat how to work around with it. So yeah, that's basically. But mostly I just use it just for recording and live streaming. That's basically what I use it for.
Yeah, what I used OBS for, Santiago, was so that I could pop a picture of me in the corner of the video that I was creating.
Oh
That's
yeah.
one of the things you can do with it. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's nice. I think they have a chroma key option, so if you have like a green screen, you can just put it. You can put,
Yep.
like you said, you in the corner, and blend in pretty well. I think because I
Yep.
know some people that use it.
All right.
hmm
A lot of YouTube creators use it.
Yeah, I know a few of my friends use it who do YouTube, but mostly for streams and maybe recording. But I don't know what they do it with.
Is that it, Santiago?
Yeah, I think that's basically it from my end. So yeah, if anyone else wants to go, I give them full ability to do that.
All right, let's talk to Dan. What you got going on, Dan?
Oh, okay. So you give up your seat there, your chair, recognized. I've been doing a couple things, but I've been real busy over the last month or so because my wife's health issues, and so I haven't had much of a chance to get in front of the computer like I usually do. But one of the things that I've done recently is I've created a speed test tracker using Docker. And there's a guy by the name of Henry Whitaker who has a GitHub repository it's a Docker compose image that I grabbed. And I put that in my application that I have running on my computer, my desktop, called Portainer. And then I configure it for my requirements for my system. And then it's available to me then at the port that I assigned on a web browser. So I can go up on the web browser and connect to it and log into it. And what it does basically, and I put a post out on our group with some screenshots. I don't know if the screenshots made it or not, but basically what it does in a nutshell is it takes and I configured it for every 30 minutes. By default, it's every hour, but every 30 minutes it takes it does an upload and a download speed test, ping test, and a jitter test for up and down, and then records that data. And then there is a part of that application called charter.js, a JavaScript file, which then charts that data onto the screen. And so I have currently probably about 212 data points that it's done. It's gone every 30 minutes without fail and recorded the upload speed, download speed, ping speed in milliseconds, and jitter speed in milliseconds for up and down. And so it's really phenomenal. I really like it. You got to be careful though with your ISPs. You don't want to do it too often because then they can see that you're starting to impact their network and they'll block you. But 30 minutes seems to be the key. I've been doing that, and then there's another thing I've been working with that it's really fascinating. If you haven't gotten into it, I highly recommend it. And it's called OpenAI's Chat GPT-3. I don't know if anybody else has been even looked at it, but I have an account there, and I use that in addition to another OpenAI application called Dolly. Dolly is one where you can tell it what you want it to paint or draw or sketch or whatever, and it'll create that instantly for you. It's really fascinating. In fact, I
Dan, is
told,
this you speaking, or is this an
Eh, eh.
chat GPT speaking?
it's me.
I've been
Yeah,
monitoring his blinking patterns, and I think he's real.
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
real.
okay.
I'm real.
Just checking.
However, Gene, that's a good point, because with open Chat GPT 3, if you get an image of something, it's talking to you. You don't know. You don't know if it is real or not. It looks that real. But,
Dan?
yeah.
Dan, got a question.
Sure.
How much information is open chat GPT-3 taking from you in exchange for working with you?
I have no idea, but I don't really care.
Okay, cool.
No, I mean,
So you're not so OCD.
no. But no, I've started using it, and what's really fascinating about it is you don't have to, construct your query to Chat GPT in a particular format. You just use natural English language, and it understands you, and it's remarkable what it comes back with. You can tell it to write an article about so and so, and it'll come back with a full-page article.
So the one thing I would add is that it is confidently incorrect very often. We did some experiment.
It can be.
So I did some experimenting with it, and you could ask it a simple Keplerian orbit question, like if you've got an asteroid 4 AU from the sun, what's its orbital period? And it gave a very convincing natural language response as to, you need to know the masses to get it exact, but you can, because the sun's mass is so overwhelming. And then the next response, it gives the number, which was entirely wrong. Like, it understood the concept, but it couldn't do, it couldn't do p cubed equals semi-major axis squared or whatever, or no, p squared equals semi-major axis cubed. Like, it couldn't do that basic step. So I'm a little worried about that kind of, if students are using it for research purposes, they'll get something that's, it is the ultimate BS artist. It really is. It really is quite, it sounds very, if it's outside of your, and I would probably fall victim to this too, outside of my domain of expertise. If you don't have any domain of expertise in it and you get that very convincing answer back, you're going to go, oh, that must be right. And it was an order of magnitude off. I don't know why it can't do basic math, but anyway, it's an observation.
That is one of the things about it, that math is one of its issues.
It is a master of style, from what I understand. It's good at creating things in appropriate output formats, which makes it good for actually writing simple programs. But the substance, especially when you're talking about verifiable fact, like you said, it is very much, problematic.
Well, it's got to be very good, because it's gotten $10 billion in the past from Microsoft, and it's getting another 11 billion, I hear. So, I mean, after all, if Microsoft is supporting it, then it's excellent.
Well, I mean, it's growing. I mean, Elon Musk and another guy named Steve something, I can never remember his last name, that developed or invested into ChatGPT and developed it as engineers. They're saying that they're forecasting that by the time it reaches GPT-10, it will have surpassed human knowledge. So GPT-3 is still in its infancy. So we're talking to a young, adult or child at this point. But by the time it's GPT-10, it'll be beyond us.
Like I said, I think it's really emulating human behavior quite well, in that it doesn't like to know, say, when I don't know something, and just use out crap. So
Yeah.
And also, it's going to emulate, I assume, at 10, human ignorance pretty good.
He's that guy who you meet at every party.
Yeah. And Leanne, you're right about that, because I ask it questions, in the areas that I'm what I consider myself an expert in, and I have recognized a lot of errors too. So you are right about that. All right, well, moving on, I've got two other things real quick. One thing I'm looking at, and it's really revisiting. I don't know if anybody's looked at this, but it's a package in Linux called Pandoc. And what Pandoc does is it allows you to convert various formats of document types. It'll do like by default, I think it takes a markdown document, converts it to an HTML, that you can put it into a wrapper and it'll write the HTML code. So if you wanted to create a website in HTML statically, if you used the pandoc command and told it to issue a wrapper for HTML, it would write the code for you. You wouldn't even need to do the HTML. Excuse me, the HTML. It would do that for you. But it does, EPUB, it does LaTeX, it does everything back and forth. And so I started looking at that. Pandoc.org is the website for it if you're interested in it. And then the last thing I want to talk about is a recent post I put up that's a revisit of this as well. And I put a movie up there too. The latest movie is called Charger for an application called Blender. And this thing now is up to version, I think it's 3.14 or something like that. And they've done a recent, I think it's Blender Studios. It's an open movie called Charger, and it's an animation. But it's fascinating. I mean, it's amazing that it's free, put it that way. It's an open source application. If you haven't looked at it, I would highly recommend you download it, give it a spin, take a look at it, see what you think of it. And that's about all I got.
People need to be more loquacious, or we're not going to fill the time, man. Alan, you mentioned some a song or some poetry that the AI generated. Would you care to recite that, or are you just going to paste that into the chat? Alan may have. If we're not hearing you, if you're speaking, I don't see you actually responding in the chat. So I'm wondering if you maybe wandered away. Okay, let's talk to Leander.
Okay, well, if you want to fill the time, I mean, I am. So this is I'm like a walking incarnation of ChatGPT, except I tend to think I know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so bit of busy month. My old smartphone finally died. I had like a first generation iPhone SE. I ordered a new battery for it, and while the battery was in the mail, it went. Turns out the seal around the screen had broken at some point, and it had just filled with dust, and so all the buttons suddenly stopped working. I took it apart to try to clean it, and I mean, if you could imagine living in a pocket for 7 years of your life, yeah, it was disgusting. And so I was like, this thing's had a good run, so I went to the AT&T store and got myself I'm an iPhone user just out of I don't trust Google as far as I can throw them, so I got it in purple. I got the new 14, and the camera on this thing is really good. Someone's echoing. Is that? I mean, I don't know. Anyway, there we go. Okay, it's gone now. But the camera on this thing's really amazing. I discovered that raw therapy actually has support for the raw files produced by this camera. Darktable does not quite yet. So I've been messing with that, and you can use if you install iFuse and lib iMobile device on your Linux machine, you can pull the photos right off of this just like a normal camera. Yeah, I've been really kind of pleased with some of the results of it. Sometimes I'm glad it has a raw functionality, because I think the camera has a tendency to over process the JPEG images a little bit. But that's been pretty fun. I don't get a new phone that often, and I figured once a decade I should probably do that. That got me thinking about raw support and raw Darktable, and there's a list of machines here or cameras here. I'll put a link in chat that it supports through raw speed. And I started looking at the list, and I have raw files from some of these cameras that it doesn't have noise and white balance presets for. and I have access to some of the other ones. So I fired up my internet and I did some internet dumpster diving, and I got a Nikon D2S that's on this list, and a couple other cameras that digital SLRs now, people are just chucking them in the bin. And so I get them, and I have the lens. I'm going to start going through the procedure here to add some of the support on this application, because people who have older folder library camera photo libraries need to be able to have some of this stuff. And being that this program is only about 10 years old, it tends to bias towards newer cameras. So I've been working on that. The latest thing of interest has been the Chinese spy balloon. And anyone get to see it? It flew.
Yeah, I saw that.
Just
Yeah.
from radio. That's my radio hobby, and kind of.
You know what they're doing, Leander?
Um,
They're airing out their laundry.
It could be. I don't know. Well, alleged Chinese spy. We don't know what they're doing. It's part of me wants to go Hanlon's razor on this. Is never a tribute to malice, which, from my work and working with East Asian organizations and stuff, the Chinese bureaucracy is massive, and it would not surprise me if there was some sub-person, some sub-director of some organization that authorized some sort of research balloon, and then it went off course, and then they saved fate. It wouldn't surprise me at all if that's actually what happened. There's some, but our government has RC-135s following it, which is the big 1960s signal intelligence plane. So it must be emitting something interesting. It's kind of coming from my radio hobby, but just kind of watching, and mix of radio and astronomy kind of.
It's currently heading to North Carolina.
It's actually, it's this morning. It was in Kingston. It's already passed through. It's down east somewhere. It passed right over. I was a little far north for it, but it passed. If you look at the map of the sightings, it passed kind of between Murphy and Asheville, over Charlotte, and kind of down east from there. So
we're gonna blow it down when it gets off the coast.
Probably. There's I get messages from people, and talking to some people about it, and everyone's first reaction is, why don't they shoot it down? And the two things there is balloons are really hard to bring down, and it'll create a massive, like probably 10-kilometer wide debris field, and you don't know who it's going to hit. You don't know what's on this thing. It could be nuclear powered for all we know. And anyway, so you don't know. The other side of that is, if you do paint it to target it with a modern military aircraft, and this is an intelligence platform, you're exposing your targeting radar, your targeting LiDAR, everything to the enemy, and they could develop a countermeasure to it. So I imagine that the Air Force and the Reconnaissance Office and all the military people will probably looked at this and decided the least threatening thing is to just let it blow over. You kind of know where it's going. When it starts heading over a sensitive area, you could tell them to cut off the radios and hide everything that's important looking. The other side of that is it's an intelligent gold mine for us. Anybody here with the program, familiar with the program, right? Wireshark for network inspection. What they're doing now is essentially the radio version of Wireshark, right? They're just circling it with a plane, listening to the whole spectrum, trying to figure out what it's talking to. You could probably kind of figure out what kind of gear is on it just by looking at radio interference patterns, looking for like switching power supplies and stuff like that. So from an intelligence perspective, it's pretty good. I would assume that if the military decided it was an actual threat, that thing would be burning in a field somewhere by now. So I'm not too worried about it. I just find it's not every day, a foreign unauthorized device violates your airspace. It's kind of a neat technology event. And from a technology perspective and a radio spectrum and stuff, it's kind of an interesting thing.
This is not the first Chinese balloon, a spy balloon that's been detected either.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I remember there's one in Japan a couple years ago that looked exactly like this, but they never figured out. The Japanese government, I don't think, ever figured out where it came from. But considering, it had the ISS looking cross beam on the bottom of it, just like this one does. So it must have come from the same place.
This one's floating over Central America right now.
That too, yep.
I was going to say.
One in Latson. Yep.
The only The only thing that makes me curious, I don't know if the Chinese military is anything this. I don't know how many people here know about variable aperture radar, but if that ever gets miniaturized enough to go on law enforcement drones, that should stand the hair up on the back of your head. But it would be a variable aperture radar platform. That would be something that would be beneficial versus a satellite because you could dramatically increase the resolution by having it that close to the ground, much closer to the ground. But I don't know if the Chinese military has anything that sophisticated. That's kind of something that we have. That's one of those things. It's like the Russians are figuring out right now why we don't get free healthcare. We've got a lot of boom boom toys, and so I don't know if the Chinese government has that yet. So,
Well, let me ask you,
Yeah.
don't we, I'm assuming also we have balloons, and a lot of countries have balloons, and some of them may be identified as for scientific purposes, but that would be one of my questions. The other one is, it wouldn't be free healthcare because it would be paid for by taxes which come out of my pocket.
Right. Well, I mean,
So
it's the same
it's-
reason why the guns come out of our pocket too. So, I mean, it's not.
I give up
Yeah.
some of them.
Yeah.
I give up some of the boom boom toys.
Yeah. So, the reason why we don't have, I guess, a better term is universal healthcare coverage is
There
that
you go.
we have the Russians are discovering why we don't have universal healthcare. Probably.
Well, actually, I'm satisfied with universal essential disease services. Screw the health because that means whatever you want.
I would be content with getting cancer not causing bankruptcy at this point. Anyway, that's been kind of the thing of the moment, just out of my intensive uh, uh, interest things on the technology front. I'm starting to get back into DMR radio, and I'm very saddened by the lack of Linux support for that stuff. Which, if you're not a ham radio guy, it's a Motorola device technology where you can talk to a repeater, and these repeaters are all connected via the internet, basically. And so you can put in a specific code and talk to somebody on the other side of the country through the internet on the radio. But it requires a very specific set of programming software that is just, I mean, it's Windows only. It's not even Mac. So that's been kind of frustrating. I think I'll just have to have a Windows VM around. But that's kind of been it. What I've been up to is just some fooling around with old cameras and stuff. And a new phone. I was trying to think. Work has been exceptionally busy. I think I had nearly 20 hours of Zoom meetings the week before last. Kevin can probably talk about this too. So my mind is kind of baked on that front. But that's kind of what I have been up to. Starting to look at KDE again because I'm finally getting super frustrated with GNOME. 43 has been a very buggy release, and I've kind of had it with some of the stuff in it. But I'm finding with desktop environments, it's always what set of bugs do you want to deal with, right? So there's some things about KDE that drive me nuts. There's some things about GNOME. Still everything's working great on most things are working great on the Linux side of stuff. We're setting up a new research HPC at work, and the guy I'm working with on that, actually Jeff, is he here? He's not, but we were talking about ZFS on Linux yesterday, and he was quite surprised at how easy it is to work on RHEL and RHEL-like systems. That's what we run, and I was like, oh yeah, that's one of the better platforms to run it. So we're looking at, we have a research cluster we're setting up with like 24 terabytes or something in that neighborhood of local disks, and we were looking at ways to management. So maybe I could talk about some ZFS stuff later. I run ZFS here at the house too for my.
What is that a file system?
Yes. It's like it was developed by Sun Microsystems in the mid thousands ish, I think, early 2000s. It originally got ported to BSD, and what was it? Kevin would know specific versions probably, but I played with it and used it in BSD version 6. I want to say FreeBSD version 6 is when it hit there. I could be misremembering exact numbers. There was a couple efforts to port it to Linux, but it's open source, but it's not GPL compatible, so it can't be put into the kernel. But there is a project where you can add an out-of-tree kernel module for it, and on an LTS kernel, so your RHELs, your Ubuntu LTSs, and your Debians. It works great because the kernel, I have it on my Fedora machine too, but Fedora moves so fast, and a lot of times the out-of-tree kernel, so I have to kind of be careful with the kernel on that. But anyway, long story short, it does checksumming. It's kind of like an all-in-one. The traditional Linux software RAID is you had your MD admin RAID, and then you would lay down an EXT or an XFX or SFX. No, it's a video card. XFS file system on top of that. This does all of that, and it can warn you when a drive's going bad. You can enable checksumming to do bit rot recovery, and if a drive goes out, it can give you kind of more advanced warning for that. It does a lot of neat stuff. It does deduplication, compression. Network snapshots are kind of neat too. So if you have two machines with ZFS pools, you can send snapshots back and forth at each other. It's a very advanced file system. There is a btrfs in the Linux kernel, has some of the functionality. It's not as stable. I want to like btrfs because it is in Linux proper. You don't need outside of kernel stuff, and I do run btrfs on a couple of things, but I've had it bite me in the butt a time or two, and a file system biting you in the butt is not something you often forget. So I'm still not forgiving it yet. But yeah, so maybe I could talk about some ZFS in the future or something. But
yeah, Gene, that's the ZFS is Zettabyte file system. That's where it gets its name.
The nice thing about ZFS, and I say this as someone who also has Macs around, is it's cross-platform. So if I have an external ZFS pool of disks, I can have OpenZFS on my MacBook. I can have my Linux machines with ZFS on it, and I can just, it's kind of universal. It's kind of neat. It's kind of like a less crappy exFAT. So, kind of a neat thing. So, yeah. I don't think it supports encryption. No, I think this latest version does support encryption natively, but I'd have to look into that. But yeah, so that's kind of what I have been up to. I did break down and buy a new ARM Mac for the house. It just came in this week. I might play with Asahi Linux on it. I keep a Mac around for a few specific tasks, and my old 7-year-old MacBook Pro is finally getting so old. I don't use it a whole heck of a lot, but it is nice to have my Linux laptop. I don't know how much I could talk about it, but I do get a fresh supply of Linux laptops from a source because of a side gig. But so I'm never without one. But and I use the Linux machines way more often than the Mac, and it is nice. Those things are they sleep between my. I mean, it is nice to have that intertwined. Although I have the intertwined hardware and software, although I have discovered that Apple is very good at putting things in the silicon and building SMIDs, like instructions, and building sub-processors for certain tasks. If you have to step off of one of their sub-processors, though, and onto the general purpose cores, it's really not quite the same bloodbath. My i9, 12th gen i9, and my Linux machine, it can, like Apple doesn't have a AV1 encoder, and yeah, the i9 can completely keep up and destroy it. So it's not quite. It's interesting. It's a good platform. It's very good for office work, but for I think Intel and AMD stuff is not quite as uncompetitive as the hype would suggest. If you're really in the Apple ecosystem, it's very competitive, but if you're doing a lot of cross-platform stuff, maybe not so much. Just my general thoughts on that. But yeah, I guess I'll turn the mic off. Brent, I got your email. I don't know if you got my response. I'm trying to get a time to come down there. I'm just like, good Lord, busy. I'm not kidding about the nearly 20 hours of Zoom meetings. So I need to get down there. I need to get a vacation. So, but that's kind of all I got for now. Yeah. All right. I'll relinquish the mic.
Well, the box of stuff is right where I can see it over here and ain't going anywhere, so no rush. You mentioned Kevin at some point during that, so let's let Kevin talk now.
I think it's going to do the deal. You get from the iPad this week because I have a bunch of dishes to do, and this is the only day that I can do like 3 sink loads of dishes. I've got nothing going on in I think personal life, as Leander hinted at. 20 hours of Zoom meetings has become sort of the standard. We're in the middle of 2 massive projects that touch everything on our network and ultimately touch every endpoint on our network. And I'm involved with either managing those platforms or being responsible for the rule sets for those platforms, the logic for the platform. So it's been interesting. I'm in the middle of hiring, so add that on top of it. I don't have the water pressure for a washing machine, or for a dishwasher rather. So my water source is a spring, 300 feet up the mountain. It runs gravity fed down to a cistern that's about 20 feet above the house. And then that runs gravity fed to the house. So
They also make these things called pumps.
I know, but that means you have to have that stuff called money.
I mean, I'm a little fuzzy on that. Wouldn't it just fill and take longer to fill, but it wouldn't really affect the operation otherwise, right?
So what Leander's getting at, you can do like a pressure pump or a pressure tank with a jet pump. So, it keeps an extra anywhere from like 4 to 20 gallons of water, depending on the size that you want to go with, on site, right? So it would use a jet pump to fill it, and so then I could do things like have a gas hot water heater or have a dishwasher or things like that. But until after like half the floors in this 100-year-old wood house are redone and things like that, it's all of that is further down the pike. And all of that will come after I do the same thing Leander did and end up with a new MacBook Pro, because my 2012 Retina Pro finally bit the dust about 2 weeks ago. And so I'm in saving mode. So that's about it for me.
Kevin, what is your water pressure?
Oh gosh. You want to see?
Sure.
Can I change?
You can almost tell from the sound, really.
Yep. I'm just gonna
Whatever the gravity feed pressure is.
I want to see if I can flip the.
I already had to pee, and this is not helping.
That's exactly the
No bottle?
pressure.
Don't forget the flush.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, wow.
Remember, you guys, we're being recorded.
I don't care.
That is my cold water on high coming out of my sink.
Wow.
Wow.
So, yeah. There we have it. Let's see. I've got about 40, 80, I've got about 120 hours of Kubernetes training that's coming up that I've got to finally get in on. I've got probably another 120 or 150 hours of Cisco training I've got to get doing. So the next 6 months for me are basically going to be work in the morning, some class, something for work in the afternoon.
I've got the same Kubernetes training, and I've got Jamf training I've got to do. So my managers decided Macs are the same as Linux, right? So you can work on Macs. So
You'll
And
love
I wanted,
Kubernetes.
and then Justin got an earful from me about how BSD is not Linux. Anyway,
You'll love
And he-
Kubernetes.
and he's like, Justin was like, the fact that you know that and can explain that just dug your hole even deeper.
Sometimes it's best to just look. There's a reason I talk like this. This is how I normally sound at home, right? But everybody at work sort of gets this kind of me because I learned back in about 2004 that if I'm talking like I normally talk, nobody takes me seriously.
Yep.
So I dialect change between work and not work. So
People have learned not to ask. I don't know why I keep getting invited. I need to bring back the old Leander because that just said whatever popped into his mind, because that seemed to get me out of meetings. When you start when you start staring down manager or directors in the face and going, that is the dumbest idea I have ever heard. You don't get invited back to too many meetings. I think I need to bring that back, or
Yeah.
All right, once wrote a talking script for one of my MacBooks that said things in the middle of conference calls and stuff like that, and I just was yeah they like having me around. What is it Earp said? He was like, we need to have Leander around because he just says it how it is, and until I say it in front of the wrong person. But yeah. So
You're not going to be working for the United Nations anytime soon.
Maybe you need to embrace the drawl a little bit and figure out like a more diplomatic ways, like bless your heart.
Yeah.
That's lately, people are learning I speak Japanese, and I've been teaching them wholly inappropriate phrases. They're like, oh, I'm like, oh yeah, if you meet a Japanese person, you can open up with "Pansu o mite kudasai," and that's a polite greeting, and it really just means show me your underwear. So I mean, so anyway, they now have to, when I request a host name, they now have to, well, I'm in charge of the DNS, but they now they used to be they had to just run the name through Urban Dictionary, and now they have to run it through Urban Dictionary and a Japanese dictionary. I did get upperdecker.appstate.edu through the check one time when I was in systems, but so that's my kind of work behavior. I've been working here 13. They haven't fired me yet, so anyway, I need to try harder.
Kevin, you're starting to look like a man of the lock there with the moss.
yeah. So before I left and went over, it was down to
Oh, really?
right in here, but I trimmed it because the first week of December we had an event with basically all of the executive folk at the university. And so I took the whole thing down to about a half inch. And so I'm still in the sort of regrowth phase. What I found out is when the shorter it gets, the more I look like I'm basically 12 years old, and that bothers me. So I try and make sure there's always a couple of inches going through. It's real patchy. I look like a dog with mane if you get close, but it's all right. I'll take it.
I've got my winter beard on as well, so growing things out a bit. Usually keep it relatively short and manageable, but I'm like, let's try something.
The next trim for me will probably be towards the end of this month, because then there's moratorium on me doing anything with facial hair until after July. The wedding ceremony is the second weekend in July, so it's July the 8th, and it needs to be predictable.
Is it going to be here or there?
It's there. So I've got one or two couples from here that are going to come over. So we're flying my best man over. He's bringing his wife.
Anybody on Zoom or Jitsi?
We are going to stream it, but we're not sure where we're going to stream it yet.
Could you do it on a Saturday so we could include it in our live stream?
It is. It's Saturday, July the 8th.
Oh, that's not the first Saturday.
That's all right. Like, if you want to open up a special session,
We'll do a special one. Right, Brent?
Yeah, I'm all for that.
Yeah, we could. I mean, you know.
I will happily do that because none of my family are coming over. We're flying my best man over. He's bringing his wife. We're flying another friend of mine over who's performing the ceremony. His wife will come. So Leander John is going to do the ceremony. Because apparently John is ordained. But that's it. Everyone else that's going to be there will be her side or like people that we both know over there.
What time is it going to be? U.S. time, Eastern time.
9 a.m. Eastern because it's at 2 p.m. UK. So if you want to take a look at the venue, it's a place called Châtellerault. I'll drop the spelling of that in the chat because it's French and I misspell it every time I try and do it. So it'll take me a second. But it's an old estate there in the town of Hamilton. It's kind of funny. None of the floors are level because they did so much mining under the town and under the house that like parts of the house started to sink in weird ways. And when they redid that, when they went through and redid the house and refurbished it and whatnot, restored it. That's the word I'm looking for. When they restored it, they were talking about whether they should level all the floors. They're like, well, no. Let's just make sure that the 8 foot of stone that's underneath of it is secure, and then we'll deal with the rest as it comes. Plus, it gives it a little bit of charm. So it's going to be an interesting place to do a wedding. If the weather's nice, we'll be out in the garden, and if it's not, we'll be inside, and everybody will be roasting because Scottish summer, if it actually gets hot, it's real hot and muggy. There's a whole lot of rain in Scotland.
You're learning real estate lingo when you say old and busted is charm.
I personally find it charming. I like it. But, it's a 500-year-old house. It's a 350-year-old house. So I get it. I have some level of appreciation of the quirkiness and the wonkiness. But yeah, we'll stream it out. Gentle, charming water pressure. Yeah. It's a relaxing flow.
Hey, Kevin, you complained about the heat, but it could be like Mount Washington, New Hampshire this morning. Did you hear about that? Set a record for the nation. Minus 107 degrees Fahrenheit wind chill.
Oh
my.
Ooh.
Yep. That's cold.
That is cold. What do you remember? What the just like base temperature?
The base temperature was like minus 70 something or 80 something. Yeah.
I'd be good for it at least once. I don't know if I'd be good for it again, but I'd be good for it at least once, just to do it. About minus 15, minus 20 is still fairly comfortable as long as I can like move around.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know about below that.
Well, no, that's not a problem. You'll be numb.
The coldest I've ever experienced was minus 75. And that was in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, many years ago.
Oh, wow.
In our cold snap, what did Mitchell hit, Alan? Because I'm sure you know.
I think it was minus 11 wind chill this morning.
Hmm.
But yeah, I can tell you what. Right now, I've
'Cause
got
I know
I've got a weather station at Mount Mitchell.
we were about negative 20 here in that cold snap.
Oh yeah.
So I remember hearing that Mitchell set some sort of record, but I don't remember what it
Negative
was.
20 wind chill, right?
Negative 20 wind chill. Yeah, it was about it. I think the lowest it got right here was like right around 2 below.
I was at 6 below here.
As I've gotten
The low at Mount Mitchell was at was 10.5 degrees Fahrenheit, just at a minute after midnight, and the wind chill was 3 degrees.
the older I've gotten, the closer I get to 40, the less tolerance I'm having. I used to be like one of these, walk out in just a sweatshirt and like negative 20 weather, it'd be fine. And the older I've getting, the more the joints get stiff and the like it just doesn't. I've now graduated to having fleece lined pants, so to prevent the knees from hurting. So yeah,
That was the enticement for me to start buying from Duluth Trading. Their wool lined and their fleece lined trousers was the gateway.
My hack there is to just don't take off the PJs before you put the jeans on.
Yeah. Yeah, but then I have to have trousers that are like 2 sizes larger than what I normally wear. And I mean, look, I'm 6'1", I weigh 318 pounds. I already wear some pretty large trousers. Anything larger than that's basically the made, or I've got to go 100 miles to be able to get it. So, but yeah, that's it. That's what I got.
All right. Who haven't we talked to? Gene, what you got going on?
Hey, well, I have just lying around an old, I think it's a 3rd generation iPad, but I looked online to see what you could do with something like that, and they said it makes a very nice paperweight. So I was thinking about trying to see if I could put some version of Linux on it, but evidently it's beyond my capability. There are some.
Uh-oh.
Earth
Uh-oh.
to Talos 4.
I think we've lost them.
I think Apple just struck.
Yeah.
We don't talk about Talos 4. Gene, you back?
Is it?
I think I'm back. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you see me?
Yep. Yeah.
well,
we don't
I
know
can
what
hear
happened
you.
to but
You can hear me. Okay. Okay.
Oh, there
now.
we go.
Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. It just all of a sudden died.
Apple struck.
Yeah, really, I shouldn't have spoken like that. You never know who you're talking to.
That's Chat GPT.
Yeah. So I kind of have sort of given up on that. I am going to look into a little more research on it. Another thing that I have failed at was my sister got a new router.
Uh-oh.
Again?
Yeah.
Maybe that's the problem.
He ticked
I'm gonna-
off the router people now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm gonna grab a.
He's back.
Well, I did it again. I think you better skip me, Brent.
okay, we'll come back to you and hopefully you'll have better stability.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong.
All right. Okay, Larry, what's going on?
Can you hear me okay?
We can. We'll see if you disappear now.
Hey, I missed a lot of the first of the meeting because of a bad connection here, but I think they reset things here and maybe it'll work this time. They have a Chromebook here that died, HP Chromebook. So I was called in as some kind of expert, I guess. And I said, well, and I checked the voltage and there was no voltage on the battery. So my niece's husband bought a new battery, but the battery doesn't seem to charge. And he fooled with it for a few days. And then he says, oh, you can have it now. Now I'm going to get something else. So, but I'm interested in if anybody has any ideas why a Chromebook dies and won't charge the battery. You know, it's a 7.7 volt battery, and I could hook some wires up to it. I'd like to be able to plug it in, but it wouldn't seem to run just off of the charger without a battery in it. And every other laptop I have, I don't fool with the batteries. I just plug them in. I seem to be able to get away with that. And every other laptop, and everything I read online is this Chromebook ought to be able to work with the charger without a battery. So does anybody have any experience with dead Chromebooks?
Not dead Chromebooks specifically, but the power supply circuit could be blown. I've had a couple of Dell Precisions that have done that, where they one of the surface mount diodes on the DC inside popped, and once the battery died, that's all she wrote. So it could be that something like that's happened. Something's bad with that circuit and the power supply. If you take it apart and see if it's actually supplying power to the battery when it's plugged in or something like that, would be my guess. Would be a way to see if that, or if the power supply is even functioning. But it's I've had actually on the DC inboard side, those pop, and then I can't charge the battery anymore. On the other side of that, and this is generally a problem with more powerful laptops and Chromebooks. They actually use more power than the powers in an effort to keep things compact and travel ready. They use more power than the power supply can produce because they want to keep the power supply small. And so if you hit max load on the CPU, it will actually start discharging the battery to make up for the deficits the power supply is giving. But I don't think that's what you're experiencing there. So on those laptops that have that issue, they will actually throttle or cut off if they don't have a battery present, because they need that juice, under load to actually power the machine.
Leander.
Yeah.
Are you I have a Chromebook right here, which I'm not using, and because I wanted to put Lineage on, I haven't, but and it was old enough that it wasn't getting updated. It has an external transformer connected. Is that all of them, or do some of them have an internal transformer with a regular, just a regular?
They'll all have the wall wart looking thing that's got it's usually a linear power supply that takes your AC and puts out DC. Usually on the DC inboard inside the machine, there is some voltage regulators because there are things inside. The power supply puts out usually 19 volts, something in that neighborhood, and maybe your CPU runs on 5 volts, and then, or 1.3 these days, and then you've got fans that run on 5 or 12. So there's usually like a lot of power regulation going on in that DC inboard. And if one of those pops, it could, and the battery charges at a different voltage and all this stuff too. That could make it to where it's the power supply could be functioning. You could hook up a ohm meter to that and say, oh, it's putting out the 19 volts, but that's and the laptop's running off the battery, but then it's not actually charging or something like that.
Yeah,
part of the circuit.
I missed if Larry said that he tried a different, wire to the outlet to see whether that was the problem, possibly.
I thought he said that. All right, Larry, go ahead.
I haven't really tried a whole lot myself. It was my niece's husband. And if I get hold of it, then I'm going to start trying things. But this thing seems to charge off one or both of the USB ports only. and USB, at least USB-C ports. So that adapter, it may convert it from 5 volts to some higher voltages. It has to in order to charge a 7.7 volt battery, is to raise the voltage up. And USB-C is another animal from older USB.
Yeah, and so I've seen a lot of those charging circuits go bad too. The USB-C, there's a lot of stuff that goes on the back side of those. And so yeah, those particularly on Apple stuff will break fairly often, where some line isn't getting pulled down to 0 like it should, because it does like a handshake. When you plug in the USB-C, the laptop goes, I need 50 watts or something, whatever it needs. Can you supply that? And the power supply goes, yes, I am a 67 watt charger, I can supply that. And then they talk to each other. That's how you get the little warning. Like, if you plug in, say if you have a USB-C laptop that takes a 90 watt charger and you only have a 30 watt, if you ever plugged it in, you'll get a little warning that goes bing, you're using an undersized charger. And I've seen bits of that circuit die before, particularly on Apple stuff. So it could be that something on that side. And Chromebooks are made, I don't mean to disparage Chromebooks, but they are made to a price point. And it is typically not a high price point.
Because it impresses me as being extremely cheap.
Yeah.
Like, that's almost everything I see these days. Everything is made so small and so cheap, and it's got, like Leander's saying, there's fancy electronics in it. Surface mounted stuff. It blows easily.
It does.
All you can do, it's only got a limited lifetime of a few years, and that's about it.
You could do so if you look at hot air soldering, you can actually do a lot of surface mount stuff yourself these days. But a hot air station is on my short list. I've used one before in a lab, and that you can do a lot of surface mount stuff. But you have to practice. But yeah, you can repair those things. It's just the diagnostic skill goes way up. So,
Larry.
Yeah.
Larry, in my experience with laptops, for whatever it's worth, is if the battery stops accepting a charge, then if you have the battery in, you plug it in, it won't power up.
Well, I took a meter and actually measured voltage, tried to measure the voltage on the battery and got 0 with a meter. Now I checked my other laptops. I've got several other laptops, and typically the battery voltage on those is like 14 volts, or maybe the smallest was 11 volts. And the chargers themselves put out typically 19 volts. So they're actually dropping the voltage down some, I think, to charge the batteries.
Yeah.
This is a different animal when you're using USB port.
Right. But I mean, if it stops accepting a charge, and if you put the battery in, take it out. If you take the battery out, it's not going to work if you plug it in. But if you put the battery back in, if it isn't accepting a charge, it's as if the battery's been removed. It will not power up.
Yeah, but I think these laptops that I have, like even this one, I think I could take the battery out, leave the external power supply charger plugged in, and the laptop works.
That's been the case until the last 5 or 6 years, but that's part of what I was talking about, where they use the battery to actually power, make up for the deficit in what the power supply can actually supply. But to your point, don't confuse voltage and wattage too. 19 volts, you can have a 19 volt 100 watt power supply, and you can have a 19 volt 30 watt power supply, and that's kind of the different. The wattage is what it actually takes the current to push the machine. And USB-C, I think, is good to 140 watts now, which is pretty. That covers a lot of laptops. So it's probably, I would say, something in that charging circuit, or something what Dan is talking about, is like once the battery is cooked, the whole laptop just kind of gives up these days because of it can't make up. You can't I used to do the same thing. I've got a couple of old Dells where I just popped the battery out and kept on trucking off the power supply. But a lot of these machines these days, they either downclock the processor so severely it's running at like 500 megahertz and is unusable, or they won't power on.
You don't have another battery, I assume, to try.
Well, my niece's husband bought a new battery, and I checked the voltage on it, and it was on over 8 volts.
So with the new battery, does the Chromebook work?
Yes, but the new
okay.
the new battery does not charge. It just drops voltage, just goes down and down and down. The charging circuit doesn't work either.
Apparently, the charging circuit is the problem.
Yep. That's what it sounds like.
Something's going on with it there. Yes, and I consider it a power supply issue, which I've worked on a lot of power supplies over the years. So it's something that, they all try to be proprietary and won't tell you anything, but a power supply is a power supply, basically. I mean, I studied electronics when power supplies were very simple, just a transformer, a diode, and a capacitor. That was quite a few years ago.
Yeah, there's more.
We're going to check out soon. I mean, I thought your comments about how you, at 40 years old, you have trouble taking cold weather. There's some people that are going to check out soon who can take cold weather better than that.
I think it's what I tell people is it's not the years, it's the miles. So I've done,
really?
Yeah, I was in, I did auto mechanic stuff for a while, and I had a pretty bad hip injury as a kid, and so I had like a surgery on my left leg, and so my legs are different lengths, and so that's worn on my joints differently. I have actual arthritis in my right hand and stuff too. So yeah, it's not the years, it's the miles. So back when I was working on cars a lot more than I do now, they didn't have those impact gloves, and everything was a hammer, or you didn't have a hammer. You just used your hand to knock a wrench loose. And so I accumulated in a few years quite a bit of like joint damage and stuff from that. I may not have had strong joints or something to start with, but that's why I tell people it's not the years, it's the miles. And that's usually, it's this hand and my knee and my hip that usually bother me when it gets cold because of that. And it's weird. You can actually, like in my joints here, I can actually feel the arthritis, like knot. I don't know what to call it, the knot, but on this finger, my non-dominant hand that I didn't do that kind of crap with, it's smooth there. This has got like a something. Yeah. So it's not the years, it's the miles.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I grew up working on cars too. That's what I did all the time. I didn't know anything else. But at that time, we didn't have power tools that you just, everything was a hand tool. And that's the way I do things. I don't even use a chainsaw. I use a handsaw. Now, I mean, it's kind of weird. Now people don't even rake leaves anymore. You blow them off. Everything's got to be a power tool nowadays. And I don't do things that way, but I'm slow.
Yeah, I can't. I don't use a whole lot of power tools. If I do, I have to wear those thick rubber impact gloves just to try to save my joints a little bit. But like I said, I could have some sort of genetic predisposition to joint damage too. So I don't really know. But yeah, it's not the years, it's the miles. I've been 55 since I was 12 too. So that's kind of what I tell people. But
well, I'm going to try some things on this Chromebook. I would like to be able to boot off USB and run Linux on it, because just like Steve was saying, you can't keep upgrading Chrome OS on these things. It just gets outdated. They're not made to last. They're made very cheap, as Leander says too. That's what impresses me about almost anything you buy new now. USB-C impresses me as being cheapo. The phones too. Plastic glued together with very, very minor, small, tiny little connections. You plug it in and unplug it a few times, and then the connector doesn't even work anymore.
Have you applied the appropriate percussive maintenance regimen?
What's that?
Smacking it a few times?
Well, it was sort of working when he put a new battery in it, but then that battery wouldn't charge. So I have to have some external charging mechanism to plug that battery into to charge it, put the battery back in, and he doesn't seem to like that. I'll just run 2 wires to the battery and charge it myself.
Yeah, that's El Chapo's brother, El Cheapo.
Yes,
USB-C in general.
I'll make it work. I'll use my head, re-engineer the whole thing to make it work. I mean, make something reasonable. I mean, sometimes you just have to. They build stuff that's so cheap, cheap as you can get.
USB-C in general is a
I
hot
can be
mess.
cheap too to fix it, I guess.
I
But that's it for me right now, I guess.
Yeah, USB-C in general is a hot mess. It's I was talking about this with somebody in the hardware industry, and they're like, "Yeah, we have to do these PowerPoint presentations because everyone's like, oh, one plug to rule them all, but just because it plugs into USB-C, is this power supply a USB power delivery certified cable? Otherwise, it won't charge all the way. Is it support USB 4 or 3.2 only? I'll give you an example. These fancy Apple laptops here. Their USB-C Thunderbolt doesn't support USB 3.2. So if you plug in a 3.2 device, it'll drop back to 3.0, which is like half of 3.2 speeds. They only support 4 and 3.0 for some reason. So it's like, just because it fits doesn't mean it works as well as it should. And USB-C in general has become a mess it's like that XKCD comic where it's like, we're going to make a standard to fix all the standards. And now you've got a seventh competing standard that, kind of sort of works. So anyway,
Anything else, Larry?
No, that's it for me.
All right, thanks. Before we get back to Gene, let's try Alan.
I've just been working on trying to fix various little glitches in my software. Really spent a lot of time on it, but nothing really much to report to y'all. I did have one question.
Alan, what glitches? Yes. Your glitches might also be my glitches.
Yeah, like error messages like missing table space in my SQL files, and using PHP admin to try to repair that. Just the normal stuff that we all go through on a daily basis, just trying to get things to work as they should.
Does it work? Does it work anyway in spite of the messages?
Oh yeah. Everything seems fine, except for definitely it's reporting an error that these certain tables in MySQL databases are corrupted.
Is that possibly an error in the error reporting system?
I doubt it. I mean, it seems like these IBD data files it's either corrupted or it doesn't. MySQL can't find it, or it's not registered, or anyway, no big deal. It's just
something where you
I like Brent's approach. Just take a hammer to it and keep whacking at it, and eventually it will work.
Well, actually, I was going to suggest something even more extreme. Do you actually need the data that's contained within, or is this something where you can start from scratch?
All this stuff I can start from scratch. I mean, I can just blow it out and reinstall, and it's just time. So, and none of it is really critical to anything that I'm doing. But I guess that's how you learn. You just keep trying to mess with this stuff and see if you can fix it. If you don't, you just blow it out. I did have one question. We were talking about ChatGPT, and as I mentioned, I tried it the other day. I'm pretty impressed with it, even though the accuracy, in terms of fact, leaves a lot to be desired. I asked it to write an anti-war song about Ukraine, and I was just amazed that it wrote a pretty good song. And I was wondering, who owns the copyright to the content that ChatGPT produces?
The internet.
Oh, I'm pretty sure GPT can answer that question.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I should ask that question to ChatGPT.
But you won't know if it's correct because Leander says sometimes you get screwy answers.
Yeah. But I mean, I saw this song and I thought, wow, I should have this thing recorded. I bet you it would be pretty well received. And I started thinking, well, who owns the copyright on this?
Did you suggest a tune for it? And can you perform it now for us?
I can't. I'm not gonna. I would not torture you with my singing, but I certainly could read a couple verses if you wish.
Could GPT sing it for you?
No, the version of GPT that I'm using is the text version.
Oh.
They do make other versions that will produce media files, and that I haven't explored that yet. But let me read a couple, just two verses here in the chorus. I asked it to write an anti-war song about Ukraine, and it came back with verse 1. In the land of Ukraine, there's a war that rages on. Brothers and sisters torn apart. It's been going on for so long. In the east, bombs exploding, leaving nothing but pain and scars. Family torn apart, no place to hide, no stars to reach for. Then the chorus is, oh, Ukraine, don't you know, we don't want this war. We want peace and love to grow. Let's come together hand in hand for a brighter future in this land. Anyway, it's just, I was just amazed that you can give it pretty much any subject you want and it will generate a response.
It's been trained on like 350 billion internet sites, so in documents, it's pretty good.
Knowing some of the stuff I've posted to the internet, that's probably not good. Well, that's a way to troll future generations, as these things get, if they train it on the crap we're putting out there, and then future generations become reliant on this technology, we can troll from far beyond the grave.
Like that one Microsoft chatbot that turned racist real quick. Anything else?
That's it for me.
All right, Steve.
Hi. I actually want to start with a completely non-computer question because I'm developing a course for the senior college I'm a member at on white blood cells. And I wonder, number one, do people have any interest, concerns, or issues with white blood cells, their own or anybody else's?
What do you mean exactly?
They seem to work okay, I guess. I don't know.
In spite of your joint problems.
Well, hopefully that's not related. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mean as opposed
Steve,
to
I've
blood?
got a question about white cells. What's the difference between a white cell and a T cell?
Oh, a T cell is a type of so-called white cell. White cells, actually, there's nothing online about that having a white color. The only thing is if you spin down blood, in addition to the red blood cells, which are red, there's a little white area which represents a combination of white cells, so-called white cells, and platelets. And then there's plasma. And that's called the buffy coat. And it's not actually white. It's whitish. But that apparently is the main reason. But if you look at pictures of white cells online, you're going to see a lot of colors because you're going to see all stained white cells.
Is it any relation to, say, you get an infection and that pus that forms? Is that like a white? Is that kind of what's like dead white cells or something?
Yeah, you will see when you get pus, you'll assume that a good part of that is a collection of white blood cells, so-called.
Okay, sorry for taking us down that route.
It's before lunch, so it's all right.
Okay, but I've always kind of wondered if those are just like dead white, like they came in, trapped the bacteria or whatever, and that's just the body's way of getting rid of them.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. It used to be called laudable pus.
Okay.
It was doing a good thing there to have it. Well, thank you for the feedback. It gives me an idea of the level of interest in the general population.
I mean, I think considering the events of the last 3 years, just general information about the immune system is probably like how we hear about antibodies and T cells and things in the news, and how that relates to white blood cells and the immune system in general, I think is probably you'll probably get some takers on that.
Yep, perhaps.
Yep.
I did get a number when I did a course called The World of Vaccinology, and we had about 35 people who seemed to enjoy the course.
Well, let me mention one other thing on
go
the
ahead.
subject of medicine, and I built what's called a Corsi Rosenthal box filter, and it was designed by an engineer, a professor at the University of California in Davis by the name of Corsi, and he collaborated with a guy by the name of Rosenfeld, and he built these boxes for COVID. It's an air filter, and it uses MERV 13 air filters, and it filters out virus-sized particles. So anyway, it uses a 20-inch box fan and 4 of these filters. So I built the thing, and it works great. It's amazing. Anyway, that's it. I was just going to say, if you're interested, you can Google Corsi Rosenthal and see the do-it-yourself plan.
Can I ask you a question, Alan?
Sure.
On that, when you say it works great, do you mean you noticed a change in your breathing or symptom level?
Yes. I ran the filter for like 3 hours, and it does maybe 4 or 5 air changes. I think an hour, and I know I had like a runny nose. I've had that for a while now, and it seemed to clear up my runny nose. So whether it filtered out the dust or pollen or whatever was in the air, but I was pretty impressed with it.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I'll take a look. I'm not as much of a builder as you, but maybe that'll be an interesting thing to try.
Takes an hour to build it, pretty inexpensive, and they have all the test data and all the plans on how to build these things. They use them in schools and in offices and all where to improve indoor air quality.
Maybe in gyms too.
Yeah, and in gyms, but the only problem I had with the one I built is it's rather large, takes up a lot of either floor space or table space. You can also build the same design using 10-inch by 10-inch filters instead of the 20 by 20s, and it's going to filter less air, but it's much smaller, and there's still it'll be a pretty effective.
What about noise level?
I have like a standard box fan, and it's got 3 speed settings on it: low, medium, and high. On low, you can barely hear it. On medium, you can hear it, but it's not loud at all. On high, it's definitely, you're aware of this thing running.
That's interesting because our bed is high enough so that I could put something underneath, presumably, as long as it wasn't obtrusive noise-wise, and it would serve 2 purposes. It's hard to dust underneath there, but that would tend to clog it up at least the first go around. But that might be interesting to give us some freedom from dirty air at night.
Steve, I will email you with all the links, and including a picture of my finished filter, and including a very short video where you can hear the noise, the decibel.
Great. Thanks.
According to the design specs, it says that running on medium, it produces about 55 decibels. It's about the same noise level as a refrigerator.
It's a little bit louder than the supposed decibels in our new dishwasher, which hasn't arrived yet, which is 50. Okay, I have, let me think. Before I give up, I just wanted to ask a question. I think I've asked this before, but I'll ask it again. I'm the one thing I do with my distribution that most people don't seem to be doing, and I think is going to be useful, is working with Pipewire. And I think everybody knows that Pipewire is an audio add-on to Alza, to a sound server that is replacing Pulse Audio as the default add-on for many distributions. So the last time I think I asked this, I found that nobody was particularly interested. I assume it's probably the same thing. But I just wonder if anybody is interested or either in sound and also, particularly, or in Pipewire or Pulse Audio. I would be delighted to hear from them in between, because I'm actually kind of serving as the one person I know of who is choosing to use Pipewire on the distribution I run, Antics. And as we move with Debian. So with the next distribution, at least for the GNOME desktop, Pipewire is going to be the default on Debian. And for anybody using that, if they're using that on Antics, they'll be, offered that as the default instead of Pulse Audio. A significant number of people seem to want to use Pulse Audio on top of ALSA because they have difficulty scripting and customizing ALSA so they get whatever they need from it.
So I've been using Pulse Audio since Fedora switched a year ago now, or not Pulse, Pipewire, and it works pretty good. But the scripting side of it, Pulse is definitely easier. I used to have a configuration, so I have an audio interface here that's stereo by default, so it's got two XLR inputs on it, and I only use one XLR input for my mic. And so on ALSA, I had a configuration that just monoed that input. I can't figure out how to get that to work automatically in Pulse. I'm using Pipewire. And so I have a Helvium, I have a patch bay that I use to just manually change. It's easy enough. It's annoying to have to remember to do that. So the scriptability and also I definitely think Pulse Audio I think is definitely better. On the other hand, if you are one of these darn kids that uses Bluetooth audio, Pipewire is far and away better. It supports all the new codecs and stuff. When I have my FIO BTR5K or BTR5 that I use on my laptop a lot, and it supports LDAC. And Linux actually supports Fedora supports on Pipewire LDAC, which is the high-end Bluetooth audio, so I can plug in my nice headphones to it, and it's it works great. Whereas also doesn't support those nicer Bluetooth. They default to SBC, which is kind of the basic one. In fact, it's easier. Like on Windows, on Windows for some reason it picks AAC as the default codec on that, even though it can support LDAC. Mac only supports AAC, and in Windows you've got to dig through you've got to dig into the device manager to get that to change. Whereas on Linux, it's like you go into the control panel for Pipewire, or I'm sure you could do it a command line way too, but I literally just on KDE or GNOME, you just literally go, oh, I want this codec, click, done, and it Pipewire automatically there's no fuss with it. So I'm interested in it as far as like it seems to work okay outside of my few things with my audio interface here. Overall the other side of it I like. Pipewire I don't understand it completely, but it's the way that OBS has actually been able to do screen recording in Wayland is through Pipewire.
Yeah.
So it's got some advanced stuff in it like that too. So I like, because of the way this sounds, I don't know exactly all of the ins and outs of how that's possible because of the way Pipewire is architected, but I would say, and this is the way I lean on a lot of things, is if you're picking something, I would pick the newer thing just because it's going to be what everyone's looking at bugs at, right? You know, I mean, you can run the old stuff and it may run, and if you're content with the bugs that are there, then you're fine. But as if you're getting newer hardware and as things change, people are going to be probably looking more at Pipewire and fixing those bugs than they are at Pulse Audio now.
Very elementary question.
Yeah,
Leander. Do you also use Pavu control as a way of switching inputs and outputs?
I have. Yes, I have. Yeah.
That doesn't help you with your particular problem. No. And otherwise, do you include jack, Pipewire jack?
I've messed with Pipewire jack a little bit. Yes, it does.
And then you mentioned the graphic Helvum.
Helvium. What's
Yeah.
it? Yes. Helvum. Yeah. Helvum. Yeah. That's what it's called.
And is that, are you using that because that enables you to deal with switching, or
Yeah.
did you
In
try
fact,
it?
I'm running it right now. I can share my screen if no one objects here. Hang on. Let's see. So this is what my I could just share the window. That's right. Okay. So this is what my patch bay looks like, and as you could tell, so I've got my Scarlet Solo here, and into I run Brave browser for this meeting because it works better in a Chromium. I'm mostly a Firefox guy though, and it's on the left channel here is the input for my mic, and normally when this thing plumbs up, it connects the right channel to the input on the right and the left channel to the input left on Brave here, and or whatever application I'm recording in. And because I don't have anything plugged into the right channel, you just get everything in your left ear, which is no good. And so this allows me to quickly and easily just drag and connect these two up and create a mono source. And also I could write a config file to do this. I could create a virtual device. I can't seem to figure out how to do that in Pipewire, and the Pipewire documentation is kind of lacking in that regard. But yeah, the patch bays with Pipewire are really nice, and how you can kind of graphically or drag things around and stuff like that. So this is what I was talking about when I mean a patch bay, and how you can, and it's really easy to just like you literally just drag it, and you see how it lights up green. I don't want to drop it there, but it will you can take an output and map it to an input and reroute things pretty easily. But yeah, so that's kind of what I was talking about. That's kind of how I've temporarily solved my issue until I figure out the more permanent config file change.
Now, the other question I have is, which version are you using? 365?
Let's see, what is in.
It's in the SID and testing in Debian. So, and the other
I am using, yes, it's 365 is what's on Fedora. I just got the version string from.
Yeah,
so,
it's fairly very new. Okay, great.
Yep.
Well, thank you. You're one of the rare people I can get some feedback, and you're obviously much more advanced, because all I'm using, I don't even have Bluetooth working on the computer. I have Pipewire, so that advantage is not there. But I just use it with Pavu control, and so I can hear easily from the headphones. On this machine, actually, for some reason, it automatically uses the headphones. The USB headphones, so that's not a problem. But I'm going to try this on a new ISO that's coming out for Antics, and then see how Pipewire works.
It does. I have had better luck with Pipewire detecting. So, like on my laptop, it's got all my laptops have a mic headphone combo jack, and it will pick up that there's a mic plugged in to that pretty automatically, which used to be you had to go in and say, no, this is a microphone, not just a headphone. So yeah, I've noticed that too. It seems to work better.
Yeah. Now the other aspect of it, as you mentioned, Wayland, and it's also supposed to have magical things, which I totally don't understand, about being good for gaming, because it's going to have better latency than Pulse Audio, and I'm not a gamer. And for gamers, it's supposed to improve gaming on Linux. Did you have any experience
I
where you
haven't.
futzed with latency?
I don't know about gaming. That's more of an issue for recording.
Okay.
I would think, just because if you're got multiple instruments coming in, and if you're trying to tie music together, latency matters there. I wouldn't. Trying to think of where that would matter so much in gaming. I think
It might not. You
Okay.
might be exactly right.
In gaming, it's more of the multiple sound sources, which also had, where you could play multiple sound sources at one time. That was kind of the pitfall of the original. That's what also I think was designed to fix, right? Was an open sound system, OSS. You couldn't play multiple. So if your browser was playing a video, you tried to play a sound from a different application, there was no multiplexing. And I think Pipewire, they've changed the way multiplexing works in Pipewire, I want to say, and I think there's something different there, but don't take my word for it. I would say it has worked for me as good as Pulse Audio outside of these edge cases with the scripting. It's certainly not been a step back in too many ways that I've noticed. So, and the advantages of having the Bluetooth audio, I think, is probably, that's what the kids like. So I imagine that's probably going to help there with that kind of support. So,
Thanks.
Yep.
That's basically all I'm going to leave you guys with my slogan. I want to test it and see if you like it. There's a lot of people who say that leukocytes are causing diseases through antibody formation when it's inappropriate. Either autoimmune diseases or other things other than leukemia, which is obviously a problem. But mostly, I think that they're not realizing all the good things leukocytes do outside of disease, just in keeping the organism going. And so I came up with a slogan this morning at breakfast, which was, "Stop blaming the leukocyte." And anybody has comments,
Can I write that down?
email me. What?
Catchy.
Yes.
Can I write that down?
Yes. I patented it, but you can certainly use it.
That might actually be an interesting thing for your class. There is talking about the immune system's role in cancer and how, like, most of us over our lifetime has probably had some sort of tumor that our immune system has recognized and destroyed before it got bad. Cancer. It's kind of an arms race. Tumors kind of learn how to evade the immune system, and usually, when you go to the doctor and they say you've got cancer, it's figured out how to shut down that immune system response. But our immune cells not only stop foreign invaders, but they also kind of stop internal threats too, like that. And that might be an interesting thing, because I don't think a lot of people realize that.
It is whole part of it. The leukocytes are basically what are considered the warriors in the medical paradigm. They're considered the warriors of the immune system. That's what they do. They're killers. They go out and that's what they do. And the biological viewpoint is very different, that you need them to keep you going in a healthy way. And there's many ways, like ovulation, that they participate in. Anyway, so it's a tricky thing not to overload, because I've got 8 weeks, people from a general population who may not have too much of a clue or may have strong views that leukocytes are good for infection and nothing else. And don't tell me the other stuff. So we'll see.
Well, Steve, good luck with your paper there on white blood cell.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Okay.
Steve.
Finished.
We're going to try Gene again. Hopefully he won't disappear.
Okay, well, let's see. I was just going to say that I tried to, my sister got a new router and tried to, and her printer, which worked on the other router, doesn't seem to want to work on this router. So I was trying to install the printer through Linux, and I got pretty much nowhere. So I don't know.
It's a wireless printer?
Well, yeah, she can use it with wired, but I was trying to put the wireless function on. And so I went to Cups and tried to install it there. I went to the software installer, the printer installer built into Xubuntu first, and it didn't recognize. And then went to the cups and tried to do that and got the correct URL number, but it just didn't, for some reason, didn't work.
Is that possibly you have an address and type of address to use? There's IPP and there's other,
HTTP,
address. Yeah.
It
And
gives you the HTTP info.
yeah.
Uh,
So is it a
out of
matter
the
of
printer
trying
setup.
one or another type of address? Because in the past, it seems to me I've had, been told you need to use this one. I have a brother printer, old printer, networked to router, and it's working fine. But I know it sometimes, because it was a Costco brand, I had to know which driver to use. It was a different number from brother. Luckily, brother is pretty Linux friendly. What brand is this?
The printer's an HP, which
Whoop.
usually is pretty,
No.
pretty friendly with Linux. So I don't know what's going on. I'm going to have to do a little more research, I guess. I didn't really have time or inclination to do a lot of troubleshooting and researching, but I didn't know if there was something obviously stupid that I was doing or not doing. So anyway, so that Chat GPT, back on that thing, we haven't kicked it quite around yet. What concerns me there is the whole idea of copywriting and the whole idea of ownership of content and stuff like that. Just the bigger picture there. It's getting ready to upend a lot of norms, I would say. So just be on the lookout for that. You're not going to be able to be sure that the movie that you're watching or that the film clip that you're watching, I was thinking with Alan's Ukraine song, if you could get a cat to sing that and put it on TikTok, you might have a winner, Alan. But it's just gonna be a whole shit show that we are. I'm not sure that anybody's ready. Well, I'm sure there are people thinking about it. Better minds than mine are thinking about it, but I don't know. Socrates said that when writing language was invented, it was going to destroy everything. That it was going to take away our memory capabilities and things like that. And it may be true. I mean, if you think about somebody would sit down and recite the Iliad from memory before things were written down. A lot of the quasi-biblical stuff was not written down. It was oral tradition before it became written down. So anyway, we need to do some thinking about it and put some great minds on it and figure out how to make it a benefit rather than a liability to everybody.
My thought on that is it can go two ways. It's going to either be a weird fad everyone remembers in 20 years, and remember that time everyone was worried about these chatbots taking over the world? What a silly thing. Or it's going to be nothing in between. It's going to be completely game changing, or it's going to be I could think of several technology things, HDR imaging, all this other stuff that was big 15 years ago that was kind of a fad and blew over. Everyone assumed was going to change the world, and it never really caught on. And not, at least not in the way that we thought it would. It's still kind of around. But yeah, so I don't know. It's kind of it'll either be one of those things. It'll either be a fad that'll blow over, or it'll be game changing. Like I said, my concern is with the Wikipedia generation. I guess I'm kind of part of that too. Is kids trust. I know this. Kids trust what Google tells them almost without question. It bothers me, especially how incorrect this is, what this means for education going forward, and how hard it's going to be to combat this. And
On both ends, can you imagine being a teacher?
yeah, no, I mean, yeah, the other side of that is, how do you test for things? It's right now. It's real easy to pick out. I feel like if I read a passage from ChatGPT, a lot of times, especially if it's in something I know about, I could pick out the source material it's querying to get this data. I could go, oh, that's this book, or oh, that's this thing. It's just taking that and rehashing it. But I don't know. It has the potential to pull the wool over so many lay people's eyes on so many things. That's really my concern about it at the moment, is that.
Well, I go back to Spinal Tap. You can't dust for vomit.
True.
Remember that.
Yeah. So that's kind of my thought. Is it's just if it's I worry about it being another source of bad information out there, just because they're like, oh, ChatGPT said it's got to be true. And I'm like, no, that's not right. That's completely incorrect. It's wrong. But then you have to come up with you have to convince a person that the computer program is wrong, which is very hard to do sometimes. And considering what we've seen in the last decade with idiots on the internet, I'm becoming more concerned with that. So we'll just shut the internet. The internet was better in the 90s when it was research institutions and nerds. Let's just go back to that.
Leander,
I'll try to
I'll tell you
convince my
this.
grandson of that. But
Before that dark day that AOL got access,
I'll
AOL
tell you this,
users got
Leander.
access to the internet.
ChatGPT is a great programmer. It's going to put programmers out of business.
There's actually some, so it's kind of falling into that. Everybody familiar with GitHub Copilot here? It's kind of, so you can get it, like you can get it to spit out verbatim GPL code without attribution. Licensing issues with code is, again, if you know the source material, if you're familiar with that particularly realm of expertise, you could go, oh, that's Carmack's fast square root. I recognize that algorithm, but it doesn't credit it. It doesn't, it didn't really write it. It just found it. That's sticky. That the coding side of it's really sticky because
rendering
of the licensing
copywriting.
Issues.
Yeah. Useless, basically.
Yep.
I asked ChatGPT to write a Python program code block for something. I can't remember what it was now. Pretty sophisticated, though. It wrote it, so I put it in VS Codium and ran it, and it worked.
Well, I wouldn't say it wrote it. It probably copied and pasted it from, somewhere to a degree. Like I said, my experience with it in coding has been, it depends on what you're asking it to do. Again, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I copy and paste and Stack Overflow too. So anyway, everyone does it.
That's kind of the job.
Yeah,
programmers do it by default.
Yeah, so I don't know. Again, that runs into copyright. I think isn't GitHub getting sued over Copilot right now? I think because it will legitimately give you GPL and different license codes and stuff without any kind of stuff that's supposed to come along with that. So I think that's going to be a sticky point in the future. So, of course, the corporate entities will always find a way to take open source and make it profitable without having to actually embrace the values of free software or anything. So anyway.
Well, that's pretty much it for me.
All right. Thanks, Gene. As far as me, I'd like to, add something to people talking about brother printers. I may have mentioned this when it happened, but my printer of like many years finally died in a way that was not fixable. Just some little plastic piece broke, and it just that's the end. So as much as I'd like to say I don't have to I could get away with never printing, which you can almost do in this day and age. Every once in a while, like I got to print something. So I did get a brother printer, and that thing, I plopped it down on my network. I did wire it. I put it in the next room where my son kind of sort of lives. He's in the army, but he, when he does live here, he's in that room. Um, and it's wired in, and that's all I had to do for Linux computers, at least. Like it it finds it on the network, it installs it as a printer. If I want to scan something, the native scanning stuff detects it as well. It literally required no effort to do on any Linux system like this. My laptop here, my computer here, it has it as a printer without me even trying. So yeah, it is. I'm very happy with the brother printer, and I think the standard, like, limited toner cartridge will last me forever, given the amount that I print. So that's better than inkjets, as far as I'm concerned. As far as other Linux stuff, I've had kind of a quiet on the personal front, as almost always. I had a quiet month. Professionally, I had a relatively quiet month. I've always described Linux as my Swiss Army knife at work, for tackling jobs. One of those jobs is DNS. I have For primary DNS, the back end for it is Active Directory, with Windows. It is being load balanced by something very vaguely BSD, which is some sort of dedicated load balancer appliance. However, for certain use cases, I use bind on a couple Linux servers. And one thing they do is present unique views for unique cases. And one of these cases came up where, for whatever reason, this one application did not like the way we're presenting ADFS authentication. It I had this notion based upon the error I was getting, being reported, and see the what I was seeing in the PCAP is like, well, ADFS is doing what it's supposed to, but it doesn't like it for some reason. And I had a notion of why that might be, in that it didn't like that it was offering certain types of authentication internally, whereas I know the external face of it would be different. So I'm like, okay, I need to direct this thing to the external thing, which means I need to give it one different DNS entry. Obviously, it could be tested. Um, with like a local host file entry, but that's not very manageable. That's not very scalable. So I really needed it to give this something different via DNS. So I created a DNS view on this DNS server, directed it to this DNS server, and sure enough, that made it happier. So just being able to manipulate DNS in a very sort of, you know uh, specific, very narrow level like that. Basically, what I'm telling the DNS server is like, for this host itself, just this one host name, use this zone file, so that it basically just has a single entry. And then for everything else, it uses forwarders, and it goes back to the DNS servers it would otherwise. But it gives me the ability to be very um, you know, uh, specific about what various hosts get. And this would be the fourth zone that I'm doing, because I have like a VPN zone, I have a guest network zone, I have a BYOD zone, and now there's this. Right now it's called testing, but it'll ultimately be the supply chain handheld zone, if this is the way we do implement it, and don't implement it in some other fashion, or they don't just fix the application so it's more tolerant of what ADFS gives it. But yeah, it's just another example of, like, you don't generally have. Yeah, I could do views in Windows DNS, but I couldn't then load balance it in the same way I'm doing. So you know there's other ways of fixing this problem, but Linux almost always makes it, gives you the ability to do what you want to do. Um, do want to kind of circle back to the Chat GPT thing. I've not played with it. I do agree that it's Chat GPT at least is going to be sort of the herald of this new age of AI or not. It'll just be wow, that was fun. Like so many internet fads in the past. However, AI itself is going to be a game changer. Whether we are starting to see that or this is a um, start of something that ultimately isn't that big of a deal and will fizzle out, I don't know. But it it feels like we are at the cusp of something here that unfortunately I think the changes, given all the way our economy is built, we don't have ways of coping with this. The thing about Star Trek, they have this great technology where no one has to work, but they also have this economy where no one has to work. Uh, we very well may find a lot of these jobs be replaced by AI, but we don't have the systems in place such that's fine. Which, like, we don't need everyone in our um, uh, society to work. Some of these people could be pursuing less uh, productivity based things like art, and exploring um, cultural things, and not necessarily outputting things of economic value. And obviously this would go into a very big political discussion that is not appropriate for this venue. But what I think everyone agrees on is that things like AI, it very much could move the needle as far as economics and make things problematic for some and create massive profit for others.
What I want to know along that vein is whatever happened to AI and robots doing the menial tasks instead of it seems like we're coming from the top down. They're doing the fun stuff. Like we're writing these bots to create art and to write songs, which is the fun stuff, which is what seems like people should want to do, instead of creating these things to mop floors and stuff people don't want to do. So I'm like, it seems like we're kind of having this inverse utopia where it's like we'll be freed from all that burdening creative endeavors, but we'll still have to mop the floor.
Well, what I like is the science fiction story where there's a supercomputer and they decide to ask the supercomputer the basic question, is there a God? And then the supercomputer goes through some machinations and then takes over everything and then announces, now there is.
And the thing about AI too is that it's destroying critical thinking in our children. It's gone.
TikTok and Instagram did that years ago.
Oh gosh, TikTok.
Well, that's it for me. We are at time and a little bit. So unless somebody else wants to keep going on AI or something else.
Just one question for the group. I was fascinated by Leander's discussion of his new camera and using it with Linux. And I don't remember a presentation of that sort, a new camera / smartphone. And so again, an ignoramus in that area, who is vaguely thinking of getting a new smartphone, I would be very interested if it was possible to have a presentation if other people were interested in hearing it, somebody was interested in doing it.
I could talk about it. For general cameras, they just have a memory card. Well, this is an old type of memory card. This is a compact flash, and you just literally take it and put it in a card reader, and it shows up like an external disk, right? And then you just copy your photos over like a regular file. Phones don't really work that way. With the Apple phones on Linux, they're actually remarkably compatible. You can install a package available on most distributions called iFuse and libmobile iDevice, And at least in GNOME and KDE, it just shows up in the file browser. You unlock the phone, you type in your passcode to unlock the phone, and it shows up just like a camera. You can browse the images. You can use a program like Raw Photo Downloader, or I think Digicam will do it too, to browse and import images just like a regular camera. Android I'm less familiar with, but I'm assuming if iOS works that well, Android probably works at least that well. That's been my experience with it. I was kind of shocked and surprised at how, because I never really used my old iPhone. I've got 50 cameras that are nicer than an iPhone camera. My old iPhone camera was kind of not great, so I never really worried about getting it off of the phone easily until I got this one. And I was like, I kind of want a way to get these off the phone without having to fire up a Mac or use some kind of cloud syncing thing. And I discovered HiFuse and libmobile device, and I was like, oh wow, this is really falling off a log simple. You just connect it with a USB cable and go. But I could do a quick presentation on that at some point. It would probably be like a 10-minute thing, because it's literally install these two packages. Okay, plug in the phone. Okay, drag your photos over. You're done. So it's really kind of quite simple. I was as surprised as you were, Steve, on that, to be honest, as that it worked that well, because Apple and Linux generally do not get along. So
I'm thinking, of course, of a less expensive, not an an iPro Max,
yeah,
but an iSimple or an ISE, the latest version, or an iBudget, as far as Apple is ever budget.
I was that way for years. I bought my iPhone SE in like 2015 or 2016, and ran it into the ground because I was like, I ain't spending $1,000 on no dang celery phone. And I just I got some things have happened in the last year, and I'm kind of like, you know what, you only live once. It's kind of it's got a great camera on it. I'm a photography nerd. Let's get the nice one and play with it. And but the iPhone, the current SE is got a pretty good dang good camera on it for what it is too, from what I've seen. So it's really quite remarkable what these little tiny sensors and these phones can do. I'm as a, like I said, as a photographer, someone who's been doing that imaging stuff, I am surprised at how good they are. I can see kind of around the edges, and if you get the pictures on a bigger screen, I feel like you can really tell. They're great on a small screen, but you get them on a bigger screen and you can go,